The clock strikes midnight. The world outside sleeps, shrouded in darkness. But for some, the night is just beginning. Tonight we dive into the eerie and unsettling world of night shift horror stories. These true accounts, whispered in hushed tones, tell of ordinary people facing extraordinary terror in the dead of night. These true accounts will make you think twice about working alone at night. Our first story takes place in a seemingly ordinary hospital, where one nurse's night shift turned into a nightmare. Imagine, if you will, the sterile white walls, the rhythmic beeping of machines, the hushed whispers of worried families in the waiting room. This is where Sarah, a dedicated young nurse, found herself facing the unknown. The night was quiet, unusually so, even for a hospital. Sarah made her rounds, checking on patients, administering medication, her footsteps echoing softly down the empty corridors. As she passed by room 302, a chill ran down her spine. The room was unoccupied, a patient deceased sign hanging on the door, yet she could have sworn she heard a faint whisper coming from within. Shaking off the feeling, she told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. The night wore on, and the unsettling feeling persisted. A strange mist seemed to be forming in the corners of her vision, and she kept hearing the soft murmur of voices, though she was alone on the ward. Then the alarm sounded. A patient in a room at the far end of the hall was crashing. Sarah rushed to help, her heart pounding in her chest. As she passed by room 302 once more, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. She paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob, drawn by an unseen force. Inside, the room was cold, shadows dancing in the dim light. The bed was neatly made, the sheets pulled tight, but the air hung heavy with a sense of dread. Sarah felt a presence there with her, unseen but undeniably real. Suddenly the whispering coalesced into a single, chilling word, uttered directly into her ear. "Help me!" Sarah gasped, spinning around to face the voice, but there was no one there. The room was empty, just as she had left it. Terrified, she fled the room, her mind racing. She had never believed in ghosts, in the supernatural, but how else could she explain what had just happened? The rest of her shift passed in a blur of fear and adrenaline. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that something was following her. Finally, dawn broke, casting its golden light into the hospital corridors, and with it, the terrifying events of the night seemed to fade away. But Sarah never forgot what she had experienced that night. The memory of the whispering voice, the feeling of icy dread, stayed with her, a chilling reminder that even in the most ordinary of places, darkness can lurk, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Next, we moved to a quiet warehouse, where a lone worker encountered something that defies explanation. Picture, if you will, a sprawling complex of concrete and steel, its vast interior plunged into darkness, the only sound the hum of distant machinery. This was Michael's domain, his nightly responsibility to patrol the aisles, ensuring everything was secure. Michael had been working at the warehouse for years. He knew every nook and cranny, every creak and groan of the aging building. But tonight felt different. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and an unsettling feeling gnawed at the edges of his mind. As he made his rounds, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, he noticed something strange. A pallet of boxes, stacked high near the loading docks, seemed to sway slightly, as if disturbed by a phantom breeze. He stopped, shining his light directly at the pallet, but there was nothing there. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the building settling. But the uneasy feeling remained. He continued his patrol, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. As he rounded a corner, he stopped dead in his tracks. Standing at the end of the aisle, bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through a grimy skylight, was a figure. It was tall and slender, almost skeletal in its thinness. Its clothes, what he could make out in the dim light, appeared to be tattered and old, like something out of a history book. He couldn't make out its face, shrouded as it was in the shadows. Michael froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd never believed in ghosts, but what else could it be? He fumbled for his flashlight, his hand trembling, and shone the beam directly at the figure. For a split second he thought he saw a pair of eyes, glowing an eerie green in the darkness, but then they were gone. The figure remained motionless, as if frozen in time. Michael found his voice hoarse with fear.
Who's there?
He called out, his voice echoing in the silence. There was no answer, only the sound of his own ragged breathing. He took a step closer, then another, his flashlight beam trained on the figure. He was close enough now to see that it wasn't a person at all, at least not in the traditional sense. It seemed to be made of shadows itself, its form shifting and swirling as he watched. Suddenly the figure moved with a speed that defied logic. It darted forward, its shadowy form engulfing him, and Michael cried out in terror. The flashlight flew from his grasp, clattering across the concrete floor, plunging him into darkness. He fell back, scrambling away from the shadowy figure, his mind racing in terror. He could feel its presence all around him, cold and menacing. He scrambled to his feet and ran, his heart pounding in his chest, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in his ears. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the office, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He slammed the door shut behind him, fumbling for the light switch. As the fluorescent lights flickered to life, he leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. He never went back to that warehouse, not at night, not alone. The memory of the shadowy figure, the feeling of its cold, menacing presence, haunted his dreams. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. Finally, we end with a story from a remote gas station, where a night shift worker faced a ghostly presence that still haunts them to this day. Imagine, if you will, a lonely stretch of highway, the asphalt stretching out like a ribbon in the moonlight, the only sign of life, the flickering neon sign of a solitary gas station. This is where Jessica, a college student working the graveyard shift, came face to face with the unexplainable. The night had started out normal enough, a few late-night travellers, a trucker fueling up, the usual quiet hum of the convenience store cooler. But as the hours ticked by, a strange feeling settled over Jessica. It started subtly, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. She brushed it off as nerves. After all, she was alone, miles from civilization, surrounded by nothing but darkness and the occasional passing car. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. She began to hear things, soft whispers that seemed to emanate from the empty aisles, the rustling of unseen presences in the stockroom. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hand trembling as she rang up a customer's purchase. One night, as she was restocking shelves, she saw it. In the reflection of the glass cooler doors, a figure materialized behind her. It was tall and gaunt, with long stringy hair and eyes that seemed to burn with an unholy light. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat, but there was nothing there. The aisle was empty, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigeration units. She told herself it was just her imagination, her mind playing tricks on her in the stillness of the night, but deep down, a cold dread began to seep into her bones. The following night, Jessica saw the figure again, this time more clearly. It was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing white gown, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with an unspeakable sorrow. She stood at the end of the aisle, staring at Jessica, her expression a mixture of longing and despair. Jessica was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The woman glided closer, her feet seemingly not touching the ground. And Jessica could hear a soft, mournful whisper, like the wind sighing through a graveyard. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, melting away into the shadows like a wisp of smoke. Jessica was left trembling, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind reeling from what she had witnessed. The encounters continued, night after night, each one more terrifying than the last. The ghostly woman appeared in different parts of the store, always watching, always whispering. Jessica tried to rationalize what she was seeing, but the truth was undeniable. The gas station was haunted. Word spread quickly about the strange occurrences at the gas station. Some dismissed it as silly rumors, but others whispered of a tragic accident that had happened there years ago. a young woman killed in a hit and run, her spirit forever bound to the site of her demise. Jessica eventually quit her job, unable to bear the nightly terror any longer. But the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. She never forgot the ghostly woman at the gas station, her sorrowful eyes, her mournful whispers, a chilling reminder that some places hold on to their secrets and their tragedies long after the living have moved on. From the eerie silence of a haunted hospital to the desolate aisles of a warehouse haunted by shadows and the lonely highway where a ghostly presence lingers, these stories remind us that sometimes the scariest things happen when we're all alone. Stay safe, and remember, you never know what might be lurking in the shadows. If you enjoyed these tales of terror, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more chilling encounters with the unknown. And don't forget to share your own spine-tingling stories in the comments below. Until next time, sleep tight and remember, the darkness always listens.